Hello everybody, my name is Blaze and today we're going to have a look at some pixeling for creating tile sheets or tile sets here in Photoshop. Now just to give you guys a heads up, this is a recording from a class that I was teaching a few days ago actually. And the whole aim of the class was to actually get these students are beginners, so I don't know, maybe you're a beginner too when it comes to doing pixel art. But essentially, I was teaching them the basics of creating a tile sheet. And what I taught them, I'm telling you guys exactly the same thing as I taught the class that I taught, was that when you're creating your own tile sheet, you should have a standard measurement for how big or the average size of a character. So for example, if you're creating a tile sheet, you should have at least your average height, and I want to emphasize on average height, average sized character in your game. In this example, you notice that you probably watched it, probably already saw it actually, is the slime, that little slime character. Again, this was just for demonstration purposes. And that's something that you guys should have, is an average sized character, whatever that might be. It might be a human, it might be, I don't know, some creature, as long as it's average sized, so that you can base essentially everything off of that. Because the tile sheet that you're creating is not just the ground and the walls and things like that, but your tile sheets are also going to be things like furniture and static objects that you're going to have in the world. So that's one of the things that you should keep in mind when you're creating a tile sheet, is the average size of a particular character. Now I was showing these guys what I'm doing in this part of the video is I've created 4 blocks in the center. These are going to form essentially the 4 tiling pieces of the game or of the environment. Now when you're creating your own tile sheet, you need to be aware that a good tiling tile, for lack of a better phrase, a good tiling piece, you could probably get away with just one. However, when you're working with something that's quite manufactured, in this case, it's a series of like indoor tiles. So if you have a walk around your house or wherever you live, you probably have tiles. If you have a look at that, you won't see 2 of the same tiles. So what I was telling my students in this part of the video, or in this part of the lesson, was that they're going to use 4 different tiles that they can mix and match and use for whatever purposes. And just so that instead of working with just one tile and trying to make it look natural, you would have 4 instead. Again, this is a very beginner approach to creating tile sheets. There are smarter ways to actually go about it. You can get away with good tiling with maybe just 2 actually, or maybe even 1 if you're using minimal details. But in this case, because I was teaching them a lot of basic concepts when it comes to doing pixel art, it's really, I had to take a special approach to actually show them as many of the basic things as possible within a certain time frame. Now this video is playing back at, I think, 5 times speed, so that's why it looks very choppy, very jumpy. But you should be able to get most of the information you should be able to get the gist of what I'm doing here. And what I'm doing here is I'm adding the highlights around the edges of the tiles. And if I remember how I explained it, it's essentially just your basics of concept art, right? Or basics of art, where hard edges will catch more light, especially if they're pointed in the direction of that light. So when I was explaining this, I said, okay, just imagine like the sun is right above the player's head. Well, or thereabouts, right? Or where the camera is pointed, that's where the sun is as well. And so what I did, or what I showed them, was essentially I put a highlight around each and every single tile just to get that point across. Now you don't have to do that. Obviously, if you're working on a game that works a lot different to that, then by all means, adjust where you put your highlights according to where you believe it should be. Now what I'm doing right now, sorry if I can speak today, I'll probably keep making this video, but what I've done is I've taken the tiles and I've essentially extended them by 1 pixel up and to the left. And the reason why I actually chose to do that instead of keeping it with a 2 pixel gap in between each tile was because I actually wanted to keep the focus on the player. If you can imagine it, these tiles would be quite large because the average size character that I used was a 64 pixel tall character. So if you can imagine how big these tiles are in comparison, that's already half. And so I wanted to keep the focus obviously on the player, and to do that I essentially shifted the tiles, or I made the tiles look less contrasty or less detailed in comparison to the character. Obviously, when you're creating your own tile sheets, you want to make sure that the focus doesn't get taken away from the player, especially if you're making something like a top-down RPG, which is basically what we're going to be making come tomorrow. So I'll be starting my action RPG tutorial series tomorrow, just to help me get, I guess, attention to a Patreon campaign or Udemy course. Still haven't decided, that I'll be starting soon. So I want to draw more attention to that rather than just keep making YouTube videos, because as much as I do enjoy making YouTube videos, it doesn't really pay the rent. So I kind of have to do something else. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to stop or try making different content altogether. And for the people who watch these tutorial videos, probably not a good thing. Or you'll probably go to somebody else. Let's be honest here. I wasn't the first person to start making pixel art or game maker tutorials. In fact, I started with Unity tutorials, and not even Unity. I started with level design in general. And so this is where I actually draw a lot of my attention to, is making level design tutorials. I'll probably do a 2D level design series. I did start one. I tried starting one a while ago, but I stopped because I started a contract with a developer, and so that kind of drew me away from it and couldn't work on it. I'll probably start that up again, but we'll get back to that soon enough. So what I'm doing here at this point in the video is I'm taking away some of those edge highlights, or some of those edge highlights, just because when it comes to making making something look aged, you want to have patches of details, right? So if each tile had that solid border around it, it would look very clean, very uniform, like it was meant to look like that. But if you look at it as it is, with patchy details, in how I'm doing it in this video here, if you're looking at it with patchy details, then it looks unnatural. It looks like it's aged, it's worn. And that's the idea that I was trying to get across to the students, is to make something look worn, you make the details that sort of make it look uniform. You sort of, I guess you make it sparse, you make it not so uniform. And what I'm doing here is I've created a palette to the side there. I don't really use it, but having a palette is useful because then you're not searching your actual tile sheet that you've created, and you're not sort of trying to find all the areas that you've sort of drawn with a separate color and you have to make them look right. Having a palette is extremely useful because you can refer back to that in case you do lose track. If you've been working with one particular color for a while, you need to change it up, then that having a palette to refer back to will help you in terms of keeping your workflow going. You're not stopping finding the right color. So if you're doing pixel art, especially if you're doing environments, have a palette. That will help you a lot. Now what I'm doing now in this part of the video is I'm actually adding even more wear and tear. So if you think about it, if an area or if a part that has a highlight is catching more light, the darker areas or darker parts of the tile would be areas that are like indented, right? So they're lower than, if you can imagine sort of like in real life, if you chip something away, or if you chip away at something, then to make something look like it's been pressed in or it doesn't catch as much light, you just make it darker. It just looks darker. So that's what we're doing with the basic shadow colors, is we're giving the impression that a certain part of the tile or a certain part of the tile piece in this sheet is indented, right? Like it's like, I don't know, there's like small craters, like proper wear and tear. Of course, more natural wear and tear would be right around the actual brick or the actual tile itself. But I was just showing these guys, I only had about an hour and a half to show them the basics. Looking back at it, I should have probably just worked with a single tile, but I wanted to show them as much as possible in terms of how much detail you can put into a single tile. So we're just working, or going to continue working here actually. These students have been probably working, they actually only just started. So they're very new to the concept of making these on their own. They've probably watched it, they've probably tried doing pixel art at home, but I guess if you're just teaching yourself how to do pixel art, you might learn something, but there are, actually with art in general, you can learn a lot on your own without ever having to go to a single class. I guess the real benefit of going to a class when it comes to games design, in my personal opinion, would be for programming, if you're not a programmer especially. So I started with a computer science background. I have a computer science background. Proper, like, I say proper and I put emphasis around that. I say proper in terms of practice, like proper programming practice. And then I just taught myself how to draw. So in my action RPG series, we'll be creating not just a tile sheet, but we'll also be creating a sprite sheet as well. The difference between a tile sheet and a sprite sheet is that tiles generally refer to environments. So what you're looking at right now, that's what a tile sheet is, generally. And a sprite sheet are the characters themselves. So, you know, if you've got, I don't know, NPCs, monsters, the main character, whatever you've got in your game, that is a sprite sheet, interactive objects. Whereas the tile sheet would be things like, yeah, like the floor, foliage, trees, buildings, furniture, if you have furniture in your game. I know in the series that's going to start up, we're going to start on Friday, this Friday. Friday for Australia. It's probably going to be Thursday night for everybody else around the world. I know that most of my viewers are based in the US. So we'll be starting off with some brief programming, just getting some movement and object collisions down. And then we'll start pixeling right off the bat. So it's going to be a mix of programming as well as pixel art. It's not just going to be all programming. It's not just going to be all pixeling. It's going to be everything. So you get a free course. And that's one of the reasons why I actually want to do Udemy, is because I actually want to do a full games development course on Udemy. So you guys let me know what you think of that and what you want to see. And I will do my best to accompany that. So here we go. We're just filling in the actual highlights. We're giving it a smoother transition from those extreme highlights, and we're kind of giving it a secondary highlight. I don't really know what to call it, because the midtone is the most common color that you see there. That's the midtone. And the extreme highlight, or the highlight, is that almost white tone that you've got there. So the tone that I was working with before is essentially just adding extra colors in, just to give it I guess a natural gradient, some sort of midtone in between the highlight and the real midtone. So it doesn't look so harsh. The transition isn't so harsh and it's easier on the eyes. And like I said, it takes the attention away from the tiles and keeps it on the actual player object. So that's just something to keep in mind. You don't have to take this approach when you're creating your tile sheets. This is just something that I prefer to do myself. All right, so I think we're pretty much done at this point. I mean, you can just leave it there. And you can try and make this on your own. But really, what you want to do is you want to be able to not just make sure that the tiles contrast with each other, but you also want to make sure that it looks good while not taking attention away from the actual player. That's the one thing that you need to be aware of. And does this piece do it? I really can't tell you. I honestly don't know. But in my personal opinion, I think it works. I think it works. It could do with a bit of extra cleanup, but given the time that I had with the students, unfortunately, I didn't have that. So I want you guys to create your own tile sheets and get yourself prepared for the tutorial series that we're going to start up on Friday. Now, even if you don't do that, don't worry, don't panic. I will be going through each and every individual step one by one. So until Friday, which will be tomorrow for me, but for you guys, it'll probably be like Thursday night, but it'll be Friday for me. I want you guys to prepare at least one average sized block in your game, just one. And we're going to be importing that and using that in the tutorial series. So keep in mind of the homework that you got to do. You just got to do a little bit of homework and a little bit of preparation. It will be in GMS 2. So if you're using GMS 1, don't freak out. I will try to explain any parts that aren't in GMS 1 or GMS 2. And I will translate that into GMS 1 for you guys. So don't worry about that if you're using GMS 1. Just get that average sized block ready for use. Anyway, that's all from me, guys. You guys can just watch the rest of this video. It really is just cleanup. That's all from me. So I hope to see you guys in the upcoming action RPG full course tutorial. Hope to see you soon. Hope you have learned something with this process, just watching it. And I'll see you guys later. All right, that's all from me, guys. I'll see you later. See you in the tutorial. Bye-bye.